Today's podcast is brought to you by Eddie. Find better candidates, conduct more focused interviews, and make data-driven hiring decisions. Hire Eddie, hire faster, hire smarter, hire more. Learn more at eddie.com. Now, let's podcast. Welcome to Disrupt Salt Lake City. My name is Jared Olson, and I am joined today by Carl Sokia, the founder and CEO of Experience Management Solutions. What's up, Carl?
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for joining us.
Excellent. Thank you.
And then we also have Julia Deaver. She's an event producer, investor, super connector. She's a co-founder of the Impact Summit, and far too many things to actually say right now. It'd take the entire time to explain it. Welcome. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
So good. Thank you for coming in from California.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to talk to us.
Just to talk.
That was totally the only reason.
Only
right?
reason.
Yeah. Well, why don't you guys why don't you give our audience just a little bit of background about who you are, what you're doing, and then we're going to talk about networking and showing the return on investment when it comes to networking and talking to people and why you should leave your brick and mortar to go discuss business with other people and how to bring that back and make some money. And we spent 37 minutes just talking about people we know in common. So obviously you guys are experts in this area. And so we'll kind of get into that. But Carl, why don't you tell us a little bit about your company and what you've been up to and who you are?
Absolutely. So Carl Sokia, Experience Management Solutions. I guess, one of the things I've loved to do is I fell into hospitality at a pretty young age and kind of grew through the ranks there, both in operations and human resources. And I've had a fairly successful career in human resources all the way up until recently. Broke off into my own organization and really focus on experience management with organizations. And so a little bit of HR, a little bit of leadership, dabble in some of those things. But I think this is an exciting topic in talking a lot about networking and really, building social capital, because that's really what's driven my career personally, professionally, and so on. I think I think it's collisionable hours is what's referred to by Tony Hsieh with Zappos, and it's just meeting people and colliding and, really being able to, gain some great networks from every aspect, whether it be personal or professional, and be able to keep that all in your pocket for the right time. So exciting topic, and I think it's one that I love because it's really built who I am personally, professionally, my family, and so on.
Man, that's awesome. And one of the things about Carl is he is a past president of Salt Lake SHRM. So, I mean, you talk about HR. This guy knows the HR world and has been there.
Or professes to anyway. I don't know about the real value, but it's I love HR. HR's working with people it's been such a great thing to have a career in.
That's awesome. Okay, Julia.
Hi. So, event producer, maybe superpower connector. I co-founded the Impact Summit, which is a business influencer conference. Which is where we feel that the influence and impact of an individual, no matter what business, no matter what you're in, what field of expertise you have, you're an influencer. And I think connecting and networking in that area is vital. Events are vital for your ability to connect and create that superpower within yourself. The more people you know, the better. That's what I've seen it literally unfold in my own business and in my own life, how it has taken my career, just the people that I know and how I know them and how I connect with them has exponentially taken my career to a whole nother level.
Okay, so you're an expert at going to events, finding the right events,
yeah.
and I think
creating the right events.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the reason that we actually wanted to explore this topic of networking is we have had several people actually express questions of how do you show the return on investment when you go to a networking event? And more importantly, what are those events that you should be attending? Mm-hmm. So what advice would you give to professionals that are out there saying, hey, I think I like this industry, or maybe I love this industry, I want to give back, I want to learn. How do they find the right venue or avenue to go network, socialize, and bring something back that's relevant?
Well, I think it depends on what they're looking for. So, for example, if you're looking for a LinkedIn local, you're just looking to connect with a wide variety of people because that's an open-ended kind of event. You're going to get everybody there. So you're kind of looking for a community when you go to LinkedIn local. If you want to go into something specific, if you're an accountant and you're looking for something very specific about accountants, then obviously you're looking for those types of events. If you're looking for Silicon Slopes, same type of idea where you want to get involved in a lot of different ways. A lot of people will be there. Get into those areas.
Do you think that it's quantity over quality, or can you have great quality at these big events with lots of people?
I think it's both. Because there are, how many, we had like 24,000 people at Silicon Slopes this last year. But yet the individual impact you're having with the people you're meeting and the creation that you're creating with those people, that's your personal circle, right? That's your influence right there. So it doesn't matter how many people are around you, it matters what's happening with you. Right? So what are you doing when you're at those events? Don't be the person at the event that's just sitting there waiting for something to happen. Go and create it. Go find those people. Go get involved. Go talk to people. Right?
And I think on Julia's note, it's also it's like you're in a living LinkedIn world right then. Yeah. And I think it's, you're making natural connections while you're with the people that you're networked with currently. And I think of the exposure that I had when I was there recently, and I'm with friends from all walks of life. And it was so funny because we had this little group of about 6 people that are from totally different places, but it's a spider web of relationships that all kind of culminated with me, because it's one of my buddies, Reno Mahe, a former NFL player that I grew up with, childhood friends. My buddy Truman Ta works for IBM, another childhood friend from a different side of my life, and my neighbor Jason Bangeter, one of the founders of Struck and Rentler. The 3 of them had no clue who each other were. Then we sit together. Right now, they're calling each other to go to lunch and breakfast all the time, just because of the experience we had there. But I mean, it was like a live LinkedIn network where you're going, hey, meet so and so, and this is so and so from my life. And I'll tell you what, I met Cameron Jensen, former football player with BYU and entrepreneur now, and we sit there and you're talking and you're meeting each other and you're going, gosh, this is somebody I'm really interested in. What a neat, unique person. And now you started to create a bond that even goes, I think, transcends beyond business, and just going, this is a really interesting individual that I think I really align with personally and professionally. And you're doing that all live during these events. And so I think it's really interesting what Julia says, because I agree.
So it's pretty easy in these big events to spend most of your time in the hallway networking, right?
That's right.
Isn't that the truth?
It's so true. But what advice would you give to an introvert? Somebody who's uncomfortable, that's there, that want to make these connections, but it's just out of their comfort zone.
I would say find a buddy who's an extrovert, and you need to be surrounding yourself with what your weakness is. And I don't look at introverts as a weakness, right? Obviously, but they're looking at that saying, it's hard for me to get out and expose myself. So find somebody who is really good at that, and you can just go with them. And then guess what happens when you're in that situation? You're still surrounded by all those people. You still get to meet those people. You're creating a network for yourself of all of the people who have their strengths or maybe your weakness, and vice versa. That's the best way to do it.
I tend to agree. I think the big thing is get there. Once you get there, and I can even look, sometimes I feel like I'm extremely overly extroverted, right? And that's just my personality. But there's sometimes where I'll get into these situations, and just being there is the catalyst. It's like, okay, I'm here, and I'm just going to hang out in the back and wait until somebody says something, and then you start to build a level of comfort as it goes. And I think if you are extremely introverted or just introverted in nature, I think the more of these you attend, the more comfortable you'll start to feel, the more the groove. You'll see similar faces that, if you're going to finance or, engineering or these different kind of meetings or conferences or meetups or, or topical, events, you'll start seeing similar faces and go, wait a minute, I've seen you before. Or somebody might reach out to you, and then it just becomes more familiar.
That's right.
And I think that's where the comfort comes.
Okay, let's talk about getting there. So I'm an employee. I identify I want to go to this event, but I have no idea how to show the value to my employer of saying, I need you to pay for this. How do they pitch it? It's the first time they've ever gone. It's, let's say, $1,200. What should they do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think that comes back to also personal branding. So when you've decided that I want to be the best, whatever that is for you, right? So let's go back to the accounting or the engineer, whatever you want to be. If you can go back to your employer and say, I will be a better accountant because I go to this event, because I'm surrounding myself with a crazy amount of accounting geniuses or whatever, right? I'm not an accountant, so I don't know what that is, or engineering or whatever it is, right? You go to those events and you feel that. When you come back, somehow you could even say to your employer, you could even, I think, make a mark on that where you say, look, this is what I can do once I come back. And then you show them, because then that employer is saying, wow, that event had some serious impact on the way that you worked. And maybe it's going to have more impact if you go to more. And then they're going to want to send you more events, and then all of the people around you are going to want to also be there, because it's no fun to be there alone. So getting a group together, the thing about change, and obviously getting there, right? Like we talked about, how do you get there? once you're there, it may be hard for an introvert, or it may be hard for people to want to take that step. But the most important part that you have to remember is that change may be hard, but it's so important. That growth doesn't come without that change. And so you can go to your employer and say, I understand that this may be a totally like random thing for me to ask you, but I promise you that this growth opportunity for me is going to exponentially increase what I do for you and the brand that I bring into this environment.
Okay, so one of the things you said that I love is you've got to come back and say, hey, here's what I can do differently in my job.
Yeah.
Some people don't have that skill set, right? Or they really struggle comparing them. So I've left networking events and been with people, and they have, and I left and was like, oh my gosh, best experience ever. We just picked the brain of a CEO for an hour and a half. I am so pumped and ready to go apply this right now. And the person I'm with is saying, I feel so bad we missed an hour and a half of work, and like that was a longer lunch break than we were supposed to have, and they didn't connect those dots. So what advice would you give on how to identify connecting the dots and showing that return in the role that you're currently in? And maybe, Carl, I'll phrase this to you as a past president of Salt Lake SHRM. You spent a lot of time at SHRM meetings. Absolutely. What would you take back and apply immediately that helped your employer say, this is a great use of his time?
You know, that's a great question. I would say, in my own opinion, you've got to be strategic about the events that you select. And I think they've got to be able to bring value to your organization if that's your end goal. You need to get the ROI explained to your stakeholders. I see this a lot in SHRM is the challenge. I say, you know, me as a professional in HR, I think that's what's made me successful in my own personal career is a little bit of luck twisted with kind of the progressive way that I love to do human resources, which is very operationally minded. It's not the old school or typecast type of human resources. It's very progressive and it's forward thinking. The challenge is not everybody has that kind of flexibility to be able to implement that within their organizations. I happen to, with past organizations, I've been the decision maker. I've been reporting to CEOs and managing directors and people where they've given the autonomy to say, wow, Carl, bring your ideas and let's implement that, and that's how we're going to drive our HR. Not everybody has that, and so I've got to be very mindful, especially as a past president of SHRM. That's something where we'd say, okay, these are the people I'd love to see as keynote speakers and event people, but is this who our audience is? And are they going to be able to take the same information that come and be able to implement that into their organizations? And so I think if I were a mid-level manager or somebody in sales that can't make key decisions on how that change comes, I probably wouldn't select those as the events that I'm going to be attending. Instead, I'd find, similar events where it's going to be people that are like-minded or that want to get to that stage of where I'm going to be. Or you've got to find probably a new employer that's going to buy in and say, listen, this is, we would love the feedback. We'd love for you to give us the ideas and we'll look at implementing them. Let's help you to, let's get your feedback to help me create the solution and drive it. But I think that's where a lot of it just depends on where you are in your organization and what kind of buy-in you're going to have from those key stakeholders to allow you to do that. And I think that's the biggest dance we've had to dance around as a past president of SHRM when you ask that question. Is just there's things I'd love to see, but I also look around the room and think, gosh, that would create value for me and I could take that back. But I also know there's a lot of people that love the idea but aren't able to go back and make that decision. And so it might stifle them and they can't really show that as the ROI. So I've got to be sensitive to that.
So I'm going to give a tip here. And a tip that I have used in the past has been playing the right card at the right time.
Yeah.
Now, as networkers, we have a lot of cards to play, right? That might be your full-time position. It might be your side hustle where you're the CEO and co-founder. It might be a volunteer group that you're working with. It might be your personal account. Whatever it is, there's just different cards you can play. And my tip has always been when you're at an event, think or networking, how can I play as many cards as possible? Mm-hmm. Now, a return for an employer is maybe they don't want to, the person you're targeting doesn't want to hear about your business, but they would be flattered to be featured in a post, or they would love to be part of a different group. And so you say, hey, can I come talk to you about this group and what we're doing? You get your foot in the door, and while you're having that conversation, you break down those barriers, and then they say, what do you do full time? You're like, I do this. Mm-hmm. And they say, awesome, tell me a little bit more about it. And all of a sudden, you're accomplishing what you initially wanted to do. So that's just a little tack that I've had. Any tips that you have, Julia?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that you have to look at the value that everybody brings and realize everybody has a value. And when you go into an event, or if you're just networking, don't look at the person as what kind of business relationship can we have, and I just need to have I need this to be an ROI thing, and because that's the stress. That's kind of a stressful way to approach somebody. But if you actually go into it and you're like, I just want to know you. Yeah. I want to like find your value. Like, because everybody has an influence, everybody has some sort of impact, everybody's got this creative genius in them. What is that about that person? And then when you find that and you've connected on this really deep level of like, I love you, Carl. Like, you're freaking rad. You do some incredible things. How do we work together? And he's like, oh, we'll have an event in Grand America. I'm like, yeah, you believe it. You better believe it. So that, I mean, there's moments where you really have to look at people on a different level and not as business transactions. Do not do that.
Never do that, right?
Never do that.
Key part of networking.
Because people feel it, and people are like, oh, you just want my money, and I don't like that. So yeah, you've really got to look at people and the value that they personally bring, and what is their creative genius? What is the impact, their influence? How do you work together to create something together?
Okay, let's focus on an event where maybe the attitude and mentality is not there for the person or the networking, they're there for the content. Mm-hmm. Carl, I guess the question I want to ask you is, from a content perspective, where are good local places for HR people to go and grab that content?
I think, some of the best are, we're here at a series talking about Disrupt, right? And I think Disrupt's a great avenue to go and get, those nice, injections of these really great ideas to really stretch your mind and get outside of the main box. You've also kind of got your pillars of HR Society and SHRM type events where you can go and they focus on a bunch of different topics that are, that are very critical to a standard HR practice that'll give you really the meat and bones of a lot of things with a sprinkle in of some, ideation and a couple new kind of thoughts. I also think that there's some good things popping up with, Jared, something that you're doing with Hacking HR and Enrique Rubio and some of the also, different kinds of let's get outside the box HR strategies for HR. But I also think it's all not even just having to attend the events. There's apps and different kinds of things where people are being able to share ideas and really promote that ideation through, some of these different social channels. Slack is a great one right now that I know Enrique has really promoted in saying, listen, you can do this passively and you can just kind of check in every once in a while and people are just sharing their ideas. And I think that's the exciting part of it. It's not only going to the events in the brick and mortars that we're used to, it's also just ideation. And how do we really, capture an idea and share an idea and be able to do that at the speed of light? And I'll tell you, there's sometimes where I'll wake up at 2:00 in the morning to grab a glass of water and I'll open up Slack and just be like, what people are talking about? Because right now I can't go back to sleep and I want to ideate, and that's what's so neat is you can do it passively, so easily now with the way technology drives. So I'd say those are kind of maybe fixtures. I think there's also finding out within HR what you're passionate about, because HR is so broad. You've got everything from the benefits. I mean, I've got a position in a former life where we had a recognition and celebration and communication position. And that's something that they're passionate about. It's more of an internal marketing role. I think it's not everything HR. It's find what you're passionate about, find your niche, and your strength is to what Julie was just talking about, and exercise that strength. Everybody is, we're all here as a human currency, right? Everybody brings good value. It just happens to be in different things. Mm-hmm. And that's where you try to align yourself with the people that you find their currency being very valuable to you. And I'll tell you, there's people I've met in my career, in my personal life, where I'm like, oh, that's somebody I follow on, whether it be social media or I've seen them in newscasts, or somebody I just like, this is somebody I just really love. And I've met them in person, no interest in following them anymore. And it's not that they don't have great ideas or so on, but it's just they're not that, I can't genuinely make that connection with them. And it's like, okay, good. What you do is awesome. But now I found that we're not on the same path. And it's cool because you still provide value to somebody, but maybe not me as much. And I think it's very valuable because that's that genuine nature that you're talking about, Julia, is, it's not always just about making the connections and being everything to everybody. I want to meet a lot of people to kind of filter it down to the people that I really want to spend time with and align. And I'll tell you, there's some of those people that I don't even know why they're in my path, but they're in my pocket. And then all of a sudden one day I realize this is the person I'm going to call. Oh, wow, you've been sitting in my pocket for 20 years, and I'm glad I met you, and we follow each other on Facebook, and you've got beautiful children, but now I realize why we have this, this relevance to each other.
I love that. And if you're looking for those events that are specific to you, I love the advice you gave of find the person or individuals that most align with your values and what you want to do and see what they're doing. Now, one of those people for me is Julia.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too.
Yeah, totally.
Me too.
I mean, Julia lives in California, comes to Utah, it seems like weekly, but you are always part of these amazing events and networking groups. And so you talked about Silicon Slopes already. Yeah. Would you maybe share a couple other Utah-based events that if people want to go network to that you would recommend that you think are top talent?
Do your LinkedIn locals, for sure. That's the Ivy Group. You've got Kalani Michelle. You've got so many incredible people working on those. I love the dot pitch groups. So if you're looking at it, if you're a startup or looking for investors, or if you just want to know what's out there as far as businesses go, startups wise, go to those, get involved, find out who your people are that are making and shaking, right? You've got so many events. I mean, obviously I'm involved with Powerful You and I'm involved with a lot of different areas. So I can't really say too many because there's so many types
of
events.
What about Impact Summit?
Oh my gosh, Impact Summit. I mean, of course, Impact Summit. Impact Summit. Yes, always go to Impact Summit.
Tell us a little bit about Impact Summit. I want to do a special shout out to Rob Duffin. He actually helps with these podcasts and produces them.
Yeah, he's incredible.
And so we need to talk just for a minute a little bit about them.
Yeah, so Rob and Josh Dimley, they are partners with me in the Impact Summit, and it's a business influencers conference, and we try and help people understand what their influence is and how they can use that and implement that and create impact in the world using that influence. And how do they use their personal brand? How do they even find their brand, right? But I was going back to the whole idea of like networking and these events. You have to remember that it first starts, it's not necessarily at the event where it starts. To me, actually, it's online. Get involved, like you were talking about Slack groups. I think LinkedIn is your number one source right now. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of those, they're great. But LinkedIn is a really important source for you to connect. And you have this cap of 30,000, right, that you can really focus on. But I find that the most important is the 400. So actually, I heard Ryan Smith of Qualtrics say this, that 400 should be like your circle of like, who are the most important 400 people in your circle, right? So kind of focus in on those. After that, I mean, it's just so many people. But if you figure out who those most important people are, you connect with them as much as possible, you're already starting. Then you create impact right there from the start, and then you know where to meet them, you know where to go. You say, if they say, hey, I'm gonna be at this place, you're like, well, I'll be there too, because I want to connect with. So you can find ways to go to events. So if you're looking for, how do I know what event to go to? Well, what event is that guy going to that if right. Ryan Smith is with Qualtrics is at Q4, heck if I'm not going to be at Q4. Do you see what I'm saying? So you want to be where they are. You want to know where they are. You got to connect.
Okay, that's great. Now, one of the questions I think people are going to maybe ask is, we are networkers. We like to connect with people. We like to go to these events. Yeah. The question would be, how do you not drop the ball during your day job and maintain that? And being connected to so many people, does that equal business success in your role? And if you guys could just talk about that for a minute.
I'll take that. I think, networking is an interesting thing. I think you're going to find a lot of major players that run, major organizations, and especially throughout the Salt Lake Valley, they're not always going to see the value in a lot of those things, right? And they're going to let you go. And so I even see this in SHRM events is you'll have members of SHRM like, I can't sneak away for 2 hours to get content and gain all this understanding because that's 2 hours away from my job and my boss is going to give me grief. But I think I always say to people, and I never want people to leave their jobs or be hasty, but I also think if that's your end goal and you want to build relationships and you want to learn content, the things that you want to do, you need to find a facilitator that's going to make that happen, whether it's your employer, whether it's your direct manager. And then I think you have to really take a realistic step and step back out of your own shoes and look at yourself and say, does this person really value me and my growth and my potential and so on? And I know that's kind of harsh because everybody loves comfort and we don't like to back away from those kind of things. But I think that's something that you really need to be able to assess, because then that's going to free you up to be able to go to those things. So if I know that going to these networking events or, going to different kind of events during my day is really going to be value to me and I believe in myself, you might need to make some changes in your life to make sure that you enable that to happen, or find an employer that's going to value that and be able to push you in those directions and that see that value. But it takes great change to make that happen, and you have to kind of walk out on a limb a little bit, saying I need to bet on myself a little bit because I know this is going to provide value. And I think that's whether it's networking or just your job in general and being able to gain more experience and exposure. There are a lot of employers that just say, listen, you come in, I want to know what time you come in, I want to know what time you leave. Did you take more than 31 minutes for lunch? And that's the kind of operator they are. And if you desire more than that, you need to find somebody that also values that and be able to follow them through the dark, because a lot of employers aren't like that. They look at every nickel and dime of every minute and every widget you make and how long it took you to make that widget, and that is very important to them. And not everybody's going to be, a facilitator of helping you to really grow and gain that experience, that exposure.
Yeah, I would say that if your employer does not want you to grow, find another employer.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, you don't want to be in a situation where you developing yourself is a problem for them, because then you've stagnated your own self, and then you have nobody else to blame but yourself, that you're stuck there, that you're not moving, you're not progressing. You have to be willing to take a risk. That's what life is all about, right? So even these opportunities, but I would say if you love your job and your employer does love you going to these things, then how do you balance that work, right? You have to make sure you stay focused on the things that are most important, but you have to remember that there are certain events that are going to be great for you, and there are certain events that are just a waste of time. They always will be. But if you can identify which events are going to be the most beneficial to you, then you can make sure you're focused on the work you got to do. And then, like I said, use the time that you're online to connect with people and also create that opportunity. So then you say, okay, I've got this group of 1,000 people that I want to be like are going to be at this event. I'm going to go there. Right? Because it's who you're surrounding yourself with that you become like.
Right.
So make sure that you are at the events. The most important events are at the ones that you want to be like those people. Don't waste your time at events where you're like, well, this isn't really giving me the growth I need. So then that will help you to balance out your time.
Okay. We talked about LinkedIn, and that's a great place to find the movers and the shakers, and to see where they're going and what they're doing. How do you build that online presence? What have you guys done to make sure that you're established, you have your brand identity, and more importantly, that you are networked on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. So I think on LinkedIn, the most important thing you have to do is not be afraid to connect with everybody, especially the people you want to know, the people that bring value to you and that you want to be like them, that you look up to them. Don't be afraid to connect with them. Don't be afraid to reach out to them and get to know them. Also, your personal brand on LinkedIn is super important. You want to make sure that your presence, that starts with your picture. It starts right there. So make sure that you represent yourself in a way that demonstrates who you really are. And I think James Hadlock, I don't know if you guys know.
Yeah,
James has been a podcaster with us.
This is our guy.
So his picture.
Shout out to James and Alicia.
That's right. Absolutely. So his picture was taken at Impact Summit, and because we had all of our VIPs would get a free business professional picture at the Impact Summit, and his picture was taken there, and I have loved that picture so much because it represents him, and within seconds he's a ball of energy, he is Spitfire ready, he's incredible. Because that picture's, and he's just a great example to me of somebody that you would look at and be like, wow, that's, so make sure that who you represent on your profile is so ready that people are like, I want to know who that person is.
Yeah.
Because it tells your personality. Don't have the dry standard, get out there and get connected. Don't be afraid of what you can do.
That's great advice. So when I started to build my network online and on LinkedIn, I did it the super manual way. So there's probably a better way to do it. But seriously, what I did, I'd be gross to know how many hours I spent doing this. I went and did an advanced search about our zip code, and I searched for human resources, and it gives you 10 tabs. And after so many tabs, it locks you out because you say so. But I went connect to everyone. After I unlocked, I found the next 10 tabs. Connect. Yeah. When I was done, I did HR, and then I did recruiting, and then I did training, and I did every variation of the word human resources and connect to every single one. And after I did that, some accepted, some didn't. Yeah. And then I created a group on LinkedIn, Salt Lake City Human Resource Professionals, and I invited every single one of those people to be there. And when I created that group, at first it was me talking to me. Nobody else was on there. And I was like, what do you guys think about this? And no one said anything. And I had to say something. And people would ask for job leads. And every time I heard one, I'd post it on that site. And I threw people towards that site as much as I could. And eventually it started to get movement. And now it's at a point where I never look at it. It's self-managing. But the cool thing is I now have, I don't know how many people are on there, but as the owner, I can post anything and email it to all of them.
Yes.
And so like I have a captive audience whenever I need it, but it took an insane amount of hours that really would make me nauseous to know how much time it was.
Yeah.
And I think, LinkedIn's such a unique tool as well because, it's not only about looking up. It's also looking, it's multi-directional, right? I also get requests or I'll look for people and go, gosh, I might be able to add value to that person's life. And for me, it's big in the Polynesian community. I love when Polynesians reach out like, hey, I want to get a connection. I was like, yeah. And I'll always send them a message like, hey, it's aloha, maloi lele, puluvinaka aloha. Just, it's that's exciting to me because I'm going, and I'll have people say, students at the U going, hey, I'm looking at your career. I'd love to be in your position 10 years from now. And I'm thinking, just the fact that you reached out to me, that's exactly what you're going to do. You're going to be way beyond me, young lady. And that's a big deal. So I think it's really looking at multi-directional. It's, the people that you aspire to be, like Julia said, they always say, dress like the person that you want to be like and whose job you admire, not the person that you are. And it is. And, mixed with, the 5 friends that you hang around are the people you're going to become kind of ideation. But also looking, not down necessarily, but people that are younger in their career that are hungry, that look at you, really make sure you're spending a good, generous amount of your time feeding them as well. Because we want to be fed, but we also want to feed others, right? That's such an important part. And I love LinkedIn, how it's just so multi-dimensional. I love, reading people, that are senior, HR people going, wow, that's just fascinating. But then I also love trying to spit some knowledge for people that are like, hey, let me just give you a little tidbit of what I did to sneak into this interview and how I answered. And they're going, gosh, that's great. That's really, kind of looking at, the multifaceted approach that you can get through LinkedIn. But another place I love to use my network is looking at some feeds, whether it be like Twitter. I love Twitter. Use it as a newspaper. I love to follow people. You get to kind of pick and choose. But I'll watch. What I love about Twitter is people will like things that they enjoy and it'll come into your feed. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's what they're reading. Yeah. And then I've gained a lot of LinkedIn connections just following people that they follow and go, gosh, that person's brilliant. I'll go right to my LinkedIn and say, who is this person? And what are they about? So kind of, using technology across the board to try and feed, how you start building your brand on LinkedIn and say, these are people that I really, people that I aspire to be like or that I love or I find fascinating. This is who they find fascinating and aspire to be like. And it's like, gosh, that's kind of fun. Yeah. And then kind of feeding that all back.
I really like as well your comment about providing value, right? Always helping that person and not being selfish. And when you're going to post something and throw a question out there, it needs to be, you need to have a lot of thought behind it. Yeah. And it needs to really get them to think. And if you're going to comment, like add value in that comment so that it's constantly building the conversation and helping them know that you're a thought leader in the space.
Yeah.
This has been great. Any final thoughts that you guys have for us as power networkers? And really, you have done an amazing job for your organizations, multiple organizations, at showing the ROI of networking and spending time outside of the office. Any final thoughts that you've had that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think that it's funny to think that how do we put a cap on like an ROI, like what is their investment that I'm going to put on this person? I think that we have to remember that like it's endless. That ROI that we're talking about when it comes to connecting, I don't love the word networking. I love the word connecting. When you connect with another person, that ROI is endless. The ability to connect, the most amazing business deals that I've ever seen have come from just connecting two people together at a simple event. It could be a group meeting for lunch, 20 people, and they're just connecting, they're masterminding, they're breaking each other's, minds with whatever they're doing, and all of a sudden these great deals come. It could be any kind of, but putting yourself out there and realizing that everybody brings that value. Also, I remember that the University of San Francisco did a study because they wanted to find out if there was ROI on networking, and they found that the more people networked or connected with others, the better they got at it. So don't forget that maybe at first you're thinking like, I'm no good at this. Like, I don't know what I'm doing and maybe this isn't working for me and maybe I should just, but don't forget that the more you do it, the better the better you get and the more it benefits you. And I love what Carl said about mentoring and loving the people who need that, because that's one of my favorite things too. And working with the universities and giving back to those. They have an event professionals degree at BYU, and I'm part of that whole helping them as a professional, and I go in and I'll speak to the universities, and there's so much that you can bring to the table when it comes to how you can connect. And I would say, and don't forget to really be authentic. I think the most important thing when it comes to connecting with people is being authentically you. Really putting yourself vulnerably out there. Don't try to be something that you're not. Don't try to look like you're bigger than you are. Be who you really are. And people love that. People respond to that. They want who you really are. They want to know you. Even if you say, maybe I don't have as much value as I want right now to offer, but I want to find a way to get there. People respond to that. People love that vulnerability, that authenticity.
I have a final question for you.
Yeah,
that
please.
you spurred a thought for me. How, through your connecting, have you been able to generate revenue?
Well, almost everything I do is everything I do.
That's our job.
Every single thing, every connection, every client, every person, it's all through connecting. It's every network, every connection. So I would hire somebody and they would turn around and say, "Can I hire you now?" And I would say, "Sure, and this is what my fee is, and this is what I do, and this is how we do it," and then it brings money back into me. So that's like this never-ending cycle. Like that's the spider web that Carl talked about, right? So it just keeps growing. But yeah, everything I do is because, and I live fearlessly in that. I do not allow any fear to come in between me and what I want. And I really just want to manifest what it is that I want, and I go at it and I just say, this is what I want to do. I want to be part of this event. I want to create this impact. I want to create a relationship here. You go for it, and whether or not it works, or maybe it did, maybe you had a client and it just didn't work out, and maybe that's not right for us. But you know what? The experience you went through was worth every bit of the time that you put into it.
I love it.
I love it too. So I guess on my notes, it's funny. She also sparked a thought with me. So Julia, when you talk about connecting, I thought of a quote by Steve Jobs.
Nice.
All about connecting the dots.
Nice.
And you probably heard this, but
yeah.
He says, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. This approach has never let me down, and it has made all the difference in my life.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about connecting, I think that's really it. You can't always prove the ROI looking forward, right? But if you trust your gut, you can always look backward and say, this is how it all came together. And I think of, how my life has been affected by networking and connecting. That's my entire life. Yeah. I mean, my wife I met when I was 13 years old, all because I was put into a performing group because my mom wanted to keep me out of trouble and singing and dancing. And my wife was 9, and we ended up knowing each other there. And I mean, fast forward 15 years and we're married, and you're going, geez, that's wild. Just because I was, friends with all these people who were friends with other people. And my career, I mean, I've been so blessed because every job that I've had thus far in my professional career has all come because somebody's recommended me and said, hey, Carl, I mean, coming back to Utah was an absolute blessing from, the CEO of Grand America Hotels and Resorts, Bruce Ferry, the guy that was like a dad to me when I was young in my career, calls me in Maui and says, we need somebody to run all of our hotels and resorts, and you've got the experience, come home. And you're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. You're not giving me the opportunity to bring my children back to their grandparents and so on. But it's all because of the connections. It's all this networking. And that's how my whole life has been. It's like, I don't deserve anything that I have. I totally believe that. But I'm grateful that I've had so many friends and deep, meaningful relationships. And something I love Julia said is, being genuine. They're genuine relationships that'll all pay off. And in some form or fashion. And it just kind of pops up in your life. And you're like, gosh, I can't believe I know this person. Starting a new business and, breaking off on my own. First phone call I get is from a buddy I went to college with 20 years before. I haven't talked to in 20 years, but we're friends on LinkedIn. We're friends on Facebook. He's like, your beautiful family. I now happen to be the CEO of a major organization, and I need your help. And I said, holy cow, well, I'm going to build my own business and go out. And he says, I'm your first client. And you think, that's a relationship I made 20 years ago that it was meaningful enough that we've kept in touch all these years, but not really had any discussion. So I think really the currency that is, the value of people is so important. I think it's undervalued so tremendously because we get so caught up in, everything else that we don't realize. Just being able to collide with one another, right? That collision time that Tony Hsieh talks about, and just, bursting into people and bumping in and meeting people and saying, let me recall, what is the value of that person in my life? And just, building relationships.
Yeah.
It's so valuable for the future. And that's been everything in my life. So I'm grateful to you, Jared, for being able to ask me to be here and being able to be here with Julia. Holy cow, the queen of influence
can you believe
and connections, man. There's another great bucket list check mark right there.
No. And I just want to give a big shout out to my husband, who's actually a director of HR at Apple. And the way he got that job was a connection of his on LinkedIn.
Fantastic.
And it's just it's the never ending power.
Yep.
It's people that see you, putting your thought leadership out there, writing those articles, being vulnerable.
Right.
That people will connect and they'll say, wow, who are you? Like, I have to know you. And so everything that he's done has also come from the power of connecting and networking. So, I mean, we've been really blessed, just like Carl said, with all of that. And so, yeah, there's so much you can do.
And I think just to jump on that note real quickly, I think that's the key. Don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Share. I mean, I took a picture of a women's restroom picture and 100,000 views later and like 50 connections from all these people. You're like, I just noticed something and I just, and I knew it might be a little controversial, but I was like, it's something I noticed and it is.
Absolutely.
But just don't be afraid to put it out there. You might, maybe 10 people think it's dumb, but maybe 1,000 think it's fantastic.
And who cares what they think anyway? Yeah. I mean, because honestly, and I love this quote where it says, when you look back, you'll realize none of it was random.
Right.
None of it was random. You're going to look back in a couple months even, you'll say, this was exactly where it needed to be. And that post was exactly what I needed to know so I could get to know Carl and all these different things, right? Everything you're doing is because it needs to be done. Don't disappoint the world and not show up. Right. Show up.
I love it. Okay, this has been amazing advice. So if you are on the fence, if you should go network, you're no longer on the fence.
That's right.
And if anything else,
call me.
That's right. And have your CEO and your C-suite listen to this if you're getting kickback, and this will help them see the value. That's right. And get out there.
Because we'd love to network with them.
Right.
That's right. Okay, thank you guys so very much for your time. Thanks for helping us disrupt the market. Thanks for your connections and really advancing the cause. You guys are awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Jared.
Thank you.